Have you ever noticed how some people leave a party energized, talking loud, laughing, already scheduling the next hangout before they even get home, while you leave feeling like something's been ripped out of your chest? Like every conversation cost you a piece of yourself that won't be replaced anytime soon? And when you try to explain this to someone, you invariably hear that it's just being dramatic, that you're antisocial, that you need to try harder, get out of your comfort zone, that this is just an elaborate excuse for not really living. But what if I told you it's none of that? What if there's a fundamental difference in how certain brains process the world and human relationships, and you've spent your entire life thinking you were broken when you actually just function differently from most people? The real question isn't why you need so much time alone. The question that should be asked is, why the hell did society turn this legitimate need into a moral defect? There's a specific kind of exhaustion that happens after certain social interactions. It's not physical, although your body feels like it just ran a marathon. It's not emotional in the simple sense of the word. It's as if every conversation, every polite smile you had to manufacture, every forced joke, every calculated performance of normalcy drains something deep that you can't replenish while you're still surrounded by people, while you still need to keep your guard up. Carl Jung identified this over a century ago when he separated humanity into two fundamental energy types that he called introverts and extroverts. And here's what most people never really understood about this crucial distinction. It has absolutely nothing to do with shyness, social confidence, or communication skills. It has to do with something more fundamental, which is the natural direction your psychic energy flows when left to its own devices. For the introvert, psychic energy naturally moves inward, like a river flowing toward the center instead of spreading out. Every external stimulus, every word exchanged, every look interpreted needs to be processed internally, chewed on by the psyche, before being truly integrated into your experience of the world. A 15-minute conversation in an elevator can generate 3 hours of silent analysis afterward. The extrovert, on the other hand, works in the opposite direction. Processes while interacting. Not a thought becomes speech almost simultaneously. External experience becomes immediate action without the need for prolonged digestion. Jung described these orientations as something you're born being, not something you acquire or choose throughout life. You didn't choose this. You don't decide to be an introvert just like you don't decide to be born right-handed or left-handed. It's been your way of being since you were born, factory settings of your psyche. But since childhood, if you're the type who naturally needs more internal silence, more time processing alone, you always hear the same litany repeated in infinite variations. Get out of that room right now. Go play outside. Make friends. Stop being isolated. You're going to turn out weird if you keep this up. As if existing alone, choosing your own company, preferring a book to a party, were clear symptoms of something fundamentally broken in you that needs to be fixed urgently. And modern culture has exponentially worsened this problem. We're living submerged in the era of constant connection transformed into an inescapable moral obligation. You need to respond to messages immediately, be emotionally available 24 hours a day, participate in corporate happy hours even when you're exhausted, maintain an active presence on social media proving you're living intensely, demonstrate enthusiasm for invitations that internally drain you just thinking about them. Solitude became a direct synonym for social failure, for inability to connect. Arthur Schopenhauer observed something brutally honest about this. Most people fear being alone not because solitude is bad in itself, but because it forces them to directly confront themselves, and that's exactly the company they spend their entire lives avoiding through noise, distraction, and constant movement. So a perverse cycle develops that feeds itself. You feel completely exhausted after social interaction, need entire days to minimally recover. But since everyone around you seems to function differently, you inevitably conclude that the problem is you, that you're defective, incapable of functioning as a normal human being should. And look, you're not wrong to feel this when everyone around you tells you that you're the problem. Then comes the heavy guilt. You brutally force yourself to accept more invitations, participate in more draining events, try with all your might to be more sociable, and the result is that you become even more exhausted, even more distant from yourself. And nobody validates this experience because for those who don't feel this way, all of it seems like elaborate drama, laziness disguised as sensitivity. But wait. We urgently need to separate two completely different things that culture insists on mixing: shyness and introversion. And before you think you're exaggerating, know that this confusion hurts you every day. Shyness is concrete and paralyzing social fear. It's acute anxiety in the face of human interactions, obsessive worry about others' judgment. Introversion has nothing to do with this. An introverted person can easily get up on a stage in front of 1,000 people, give a technically brilliant speech, command a tense meeting, and still need 8 hours completely alone afterward just to process all that energy that was spent. Jung was categorical. Introversion is how your energy naturally works, not an acquired social deficit. You can perfectly well be introverted and socially extremely competent at the same time. You can be charming when you want, funny in appropriate situations, even performative when really necessary. What happens is that maintaining that polished external presence costs absurdly high in terms of psychic energy. Every social interaction requires what Jung called the persona, that social mask that absolutely everyone uses to function in the world. Everyone has one. But for those whose psychic orientation is naturally internal, sustaining that mask demands disproportionate energy. It's like holding your breath underwater. You can do it, but not for very long. And when you can finally take it off, the first thing you need is air, silence, to return to yourself. And here's what really happens when you're alone. Something that those who don't feel this way will never truly understand. It's not that you're doing nothing. It's that your unconscious is actively working. Jung described a constant process of internal dialogue between different parts of the psyche. External experiences need to be integrated. Contradictions need to be processed. Internal symbols emerge asking for attention. This deep psychic work requires space empty of external stimulus, literal and mental silence. Without this protected space, everything inevitably gets congested. Imagine that each social interaction adds information to a system that needs to organize it before receiving more. If you keep adding without pausing to process, you reach a point where the system crashes. Generalized anxiety, disproportionate irritability, that horrible physical feeling of being absolutely full, saturated, incapable of absorbing anything more. It's not dramatic or poetic. It's mechanical, almost computational. Your brain is asking for mandatory maintenance time, and you keep ignoring it because you learned that asking for time alone is selfishness. There's also a specific internal noise that certain people constantly carry, a buzz that never turns off. You don't just passively live experiences. You compulsively revisit them, examine them from all possible angles. An ambiguous phrase said casually keeps echoing internally for entire days, changing form. A strange look becomes material for deep analysis. It's not paranoia. It's simply that your mind works in multiple simultaneous layers, processing information in depth. Jung called this the constant activity of the unconscious. While you're physically present in the external world, there's a powerful internal processor running in the background, comparing patterns, connecting distant dots, searching for deeper meanings. For those who genuinely don't function this way, this seems like unnecessary complication. Just relax. Live without thinking so much. Stop analyzing every detail. But you don't consciously choose to think so much. It's not an acquired habit that can be unlearned. It's literally like asking someone to stop being hungry. And here's what Schopenhauer perceived with painful clarity. Solitude ends up being the natural lot of spirits who instinctively seek depth. Not because they're superior, but because most human interactions operate at a level of superficiality that doesn't nourish those who hunger for real substance. This isn't arrogance. It's honest recognition of basic incompatibility, conversation about the weather, gossip about celebrities, mechanical complaints about traffic. These exchanges function as social lubricant for many people. But if you're seeking something denser, these interactions not only don't feed you, but actively drain you. You leave an hour of small talk feeling emptier than when you entered. And then you go home, close the door, and finally can breathe. Except there's a dangerous side to all this that needs to be said without romanticization. Not all solitude is healthy or transformative. There's a brutal difference between conscious withdrawal that nourishes and neurotic isolation that destroys. Jung differentiated the introversion you're born with from pathological complexes you develop. When you isolate because you genuinely need to process experiences, integrate internal contradictions, reorganize priorities, that's natural psychic maintenance. When you isolate because you fear people, because you nurture toxic resentment, because you've lost the ability to connect, that's pathological escape. How do you know which is which? Pay brutal attention to what your time alone generates. If after hours or days withdrawn you feel clearer, more whole, with renewed energy and ready to return to the world, it's healthy solitude. If you become increasingly bitter, cultivating narratives of superiority or victimhood, losing touch with shared reality, it's become pathology. Brutal honesty with yourself is essential. Because it's tempting to use introversion as an excuse to avoid all the necessary discomfort that genuine relationships require. And this is where the central concept that Jung dedicated decades studying comes in: individuation. This term became empty pop psychology jargon, but the original meaning is precise. It's not self-help. Individuation is the process of becoming who you really are, integrating conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, persona and self. It's deep psychic work of recognizing and integrating all the parts that were repressed, denied, or never developed. And this transformative process requires solitude, not as a final goal, but as an indispensable tool. It's in silence that unconscious patterns become visible. It's away from the noise that internal symbols can emerge. Jung practiced active imagination, a deliberate dialogue with figures of the unconscious. It sounds esoteric, but it's deeply practical. When you stop filling every second with external stimulus, you begin to notice an internal conversation that's always been happening. You just never gave it space to be heard. People who naturally need a lot of time alone are often, without knowing how to name it, in a process of individuation. There's an internal force pulling you inward, demanding that you stop performing and start finding yourself. This force doesn't ask permission. It manifests as inexplicable exhaustion after superficial interactions, as a physical need for silence, as a feeling of losing touch with yourself when you stay too long in social mode. But what really happens when you're alone? Because from the outside, it looks like nothing's happening. You're lying down, or walking aimlessly, or looking out the window. For those who don't live this, it seems like a waste of time. But internally, there's an active process happening. Emotions you didn't have time to feel during the day can finally be processed. Fragmented experiences begin to organize into coherent narrative. Parts of you that stay silent in performance mode finally get to speak. Jung observed that the unconscious works especially in these moments of apparent inactivity. Insights emerge not when you're trying to solve problems, but when you're present with yourself. Daydreams bring connections that linear thinking would never reach. Images appear loaded with meaning you didn't put there. Solitude is an absence of activity. It's presence of a different kind of work, invisible to those on the outside. And there's a crucial difference between two types of solitude. Passive solitude is the one where you scroll infinite feeds, watch series after series, consume content non-stop, but you're technically alone. This isn't withdrawal. It's avoiding confrontation with yourself through constant distraction. You're physically isolated but mentally flooded with external voices. Nothing gets processed because you're not really present. Active solitude is different. It's walking without headphones. It's writing with no goal of producing anything. It's sitting and letting thoughts come without trying to organize them immediately. It's deliberate contemplation, conscious presence with what's happening inside. Schopenhauer valued this as the only way to access deep truths beyond the blind will that pushes us from one desire to another. Inactive solitude transforms. Passive solitude only postpones the encounter with yourself. And here's a frustration every deep introvert knows. You can't explain this to those who don't feel it. When you try to justify your need for space, it sounds like rejection. When you say, "I need some time alone," the person hears you don't like me. Genuine extroverts don't understand because for them, solitude is deprivation, not nourishment. It's like explaining thirst to someone who's never felt it. The subjective experience is incompatible. Jung explained that opposite psychological types frequently project their own experience onto the other. The extrovert assumes you're unhappy alone because they would be. You assume the person needs space sometimes because you do. Both are wrong, and this creates constant conflict in relationships, work, family. You're not asking for something absurd. You're asking that they respect your basic configuration. But for those who don't share it, it seems like a whim. And romantic relationships make this even more complicated. How do you maintain genuine intimacy when you need so much time alone? Romantic culture sells the idea of total fusion, of wanting to be together 24 hours, that true love means never wanting space. This is delusion. But it's culturally reinforced delusion that makes you feel guilty every time you need to withdraw. Jung was aware of this in his own life. He was married to Emma, maintained a relationship with Tony Wolfe, but also had Bollingen, a personal retreat where he spent periods alone. It wasn't rejection of the people he loved. It was maintenance of himself. He understood that if he lost touch with himself, he'd have nothing genuine to offer in relationships. Communicating "I need time alone" isn't selfishness. It's mature honesty. And partners who don't respect this don't respect you. But there's a subtle trap waiting for those who spend too much time in introspection. The line between self-knowledge and self-obsession is thin. Jung warned about when you start thinking you're too special, when a person excessively identifies with contents of the unconscious, or develops a sense of being too deep for the common world. You start seeing everyone out there as superficial, empty, incapable of depth. And in this, paradoxically, you become as disconnected as the people you criticize. And there lies the problem. Excessive solitude without reality testing can generate delusion. Not your internal perceptions need to be occasionally confronted with external feedback. Otherwise, you build an imaginary world distant from what exists. Introspection serves to return to the world with more awareness, not to abandon it permanently. The roots stay in interiority, but the branches need to be out there, participating, contributing, testing whether what you discovered alone has validity when put into practice. So how do you use time alone in a way that transforms instead of just isolating? And look, nobody blames you for not knowing how to do this right at first. Structure is what makes all the difference here. Disorganized time alone just becomes you chewing on the same thoughts endlessly. Structured time generates real insight. It can be an extremely simple ritual. Walking always at the same time. Or writing 20 minutes before bed. Sitting in silence with coffee every morning. Repetition creates a container where the unconscious knows it can emerge without being interrupted. You also need a concrete physical space that's exclusively yours. Even if it's just a chair in the corner of your room. A place that when you're there, everyone knows you're in internal mode and shouldn't be disturbed. Jung had his office in Bollingen, Montaigne had his tower, Virginia Woolf talked about the importance of a room of one's own. It's not luxury. It's psychic necessity to have a place where you don't need to perform. If you're enjoying this content, check out in the first comment our exclusive ebook, Alchemy and Archetypes. Here's another essential thing: real conscious presence. When you're alone, be really alone. No music filling silence. Yes, no podcast while washing dishes. No television on just to make noise. I know it's hard at first, but the initial discomfort with total silence is exactly what needs to be crossed. It's there, when you stop avoiding the emptiness, that important things appear. And there's direct dialogue with your unconscious through journaling or art. Doesn't need to be good. It's not to show anyone. It's a communication channel between parts of you that don't speak through linear thought. Jung practiced this by drawing mandalas, painting dream images, writing conversations with internal figures. Seems strange until you try it and realize it works. Things you didn't know you knew start to appear. But always remember, the goal isn't permanent isolation. It's creating sustainable rhythm between withdrawal and participation. Schopenhauer lived reclusive but published works that dialogued with all humanity. Solitude fed his contribution to the world. After periods of deep introspection, you return to interactions with more clarity, more authenticity, genuine energy instead of empty performance. It's like breathing. You can't only inhale, can't only exhale. You need both movements. Internal withdrawal followed by external expression. And the rhythm varies for each person. Some need hours alone every day. Others need occasional days or weeks. There's no right formula. There's only your specific truth, which you discover by paying honest attention to what your body and psyche are asking for. And it's tempting, when you finally understand you're not wrong for needing solitude, to fall into the opposite trap, romanticizing this as a mark of superiority, and as if being introspective automatically made you deeper, more conscious, more evolved than extroverts. It doesn't. Jung was categorical. No psychological type is superior to another. They're just different. You're not better than anyone for needing time alone. You're not more intelligent, more sensitive, more spiritualized. You're just configured differently. And this difference isn't moral achievement. It's a way of being you were already born having. Accepting this without arrogance frees you from the need to prove your form of existing is superior. You simply are this way. And people who function differently simply are that way. Neither is right or wrong. They're different responses to the same problem of existing. When you stop fighting your nature, when you stop trying to fit into a mold that never fit, when you accept that your time alone isn't a defect but a characteristic, something changes. The guilt disappears. The need for justification disappears. You begin to use this time consciously, transforming it from something you do shamefully into something you deliberately cultivate. And the world needs people who know how to be with themselves just as much as it needs naturally sociable people. We need those who process deeply, who question, who return from silence with perspectives that only appear away from collective noise. Jung believed that individuation wasn't a narcissistic journey. It was ethical responsibility, becoming who you really are to contribute your unique note to the human symphony. Because here's the final truth. When you're genuinely connected with yourself, your interactions with others become more real. You stop performing and start actually showing up. Stop saying what you believe you should say and speak what you really think. Stop maintaining relationships out of obligation and cultivate only those that have substance. Your time alone doesn't distance you from people. It prepares you to be present when you choose to be. So maybe the question isn't why you need so much time alone. Maybe it's, what are you going to do with this time now that you understand it's not a problem but a tool? How will you transform these hours of withdrawal into fuel for more authentic presence in the world? What if your time alone isn't a limitation to overcome, but a specific gift to cultivate with dedication? You don't need to apologize for who you are. You don't need to force yourself to be more sociable, more available. I'm more like someone you'll never be. You just need to understand your own nature with brutal honesty, use your time alone consciously, and trust that when you're whole on the inside, your presence out there becomes infinitely more valuable than any performance of normalcy could ever be. The silence you seek isn't empty. It's space where you can finally hear who you really are underneath all the masks the world insists you wear. And that conversation, between you and yourself, might be the most important one of your life. If this video made sense, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and consider joining the membership club to get access to exclusive content that deepens these reflections even further. Your self-knowledge journey deserves every available tool. And always remember, being alone isn't being lost. Sometimes it's exactly where you find yourself.